Hello, everyone. Welcome to the BYOV panel here at Fringe. Give me one quick moment just to switch off my music tab and go to my panel outline tab. But my name is Lois. I your co-festival director here at Hollywood Fringe. My pronouns are she, her. A visual description, I'm a white woman with mid-length brown hair, currently wearing a yellow sweater. Behind me, you can see a ridiculous amount of bags, a bookshelf, a kind of red wine wall, and a mystical forest painting. Thank you so much for joining, y'all. Feel free. I know it is like late on a Monday night, and sometimes it's easier to have your camera off. But if you are in the audience and want to put your camera on, that would rock. Sometimes it helps to have just that shared energy in these spaces. And we have some brilliant panelists lined up who are going to give you a lot of their amazing energy. So just throwing it out there as an option. Before we jump in any further, I want to do a quick land acknowledgement. The Hollywood Fringe acknowledges that we are on the unceded lands of the Tongva, Quiche, Gabrielinos, and Gabrielinos. Our statement serves as a practice as we commit to furthering our connection to Indigenous communities past, present, and emerging. Note that we do have audio captioning on today's panel to provide access, but we do have interpreters available upon request. So if you want an interpreter for any of our HFF run panels, please let us know at least 72 hours in advance via support@hollywoodfringe.org, and we will make sure one is provided for the upcoming events. Additionally, this is being live streamed and recorded to our YouTube channel. So, hey to anyone who is watching from YouTube. Roddy, our brilliant artist services manager, is in that chat. So feel free to get involved either on YouTube or here on Zoom. Ask your questions, talk about things as we're going through the panel, and Roddy will be in there to moderate the chat. Okay, a few announcements before we jump into today's panel, which of course is going to be all about BYOVs or bring your own venues here at Fringe. But additionally, we're going to also kind of run into the immersive, the site-specific world, because so often the shows that are BYOV at Fringe also lean immersive and site-specific. And so we have so much experience on today's panel. We're also going to dive into that creative side of the BYOV experience. Okay, a few announcements. So registration is officially open. Y'all, hot damn, the 15th anniversary season is officially underway. Remember, you have until April 15th to register to be included in the printed guide. So keep that deadline locked in your brains. Don't miss a beat by making sure you're signed up for the Hollywood Fringe newsletter. Once you're registered for the festival, you will get added to a participant newsletter that will keep you up to date on everything going on. But in the meantime, make sure you're signed up for our general newsletter so that you don't miss any upcoming events or deadlines. All of our events can also be found at hollywoodfringe.org/events. We have a ridiculous amount of educational series, town halls, and networking events, all made to prepare you for your Fringe journey from A to Z. So if you're coming in as an artist, but maybe not a producer, these events are literally designed to make sure that you walk into June a producer ready to market, sell seats, and have a great Fringe. Tomorrow is the deadline for Fringe scholarships. Y'all, 20 or just a little over 24 hours. So make sure if you are interested in applying for a Fringe scholarship, go to our page, hollywoodfringe.org/scholarship. I highly recommend it. It's an amazing opportunity. So please, if you haven't applied and are considering it, you got more than 24 hours to do so, so jump right in on that. Additionally, we have our Artist Fund, which will be opening on February 10th, and that is for all local Los Angelinos who identify as low income. So make sure you keep an eye out for upcoming newsletters to apply for our Artist Fund. Okay, before we dive in, that's about all of our announcements, but I want to go over some of the logistics with bringing your own venue because it is kind of a world all on its own. The more like traditional approach to Fringe is, bringing your show to a registered venue, and then you have the additional support of that registered venue that already knows how Fringe works. They are responsible for scheduling your performances. They kind of help navigate the experience with you. Whereas with BOV, you're kind of doing it on your own. So this workshop is designed to make sure you kind of have a full understanding of what that means on the Fringe side, and then additionally get the expertise from brilliant panelists who have done it successfully before to share the pros, the cons, and all of the beautiful things that will make that experience delightful for you. Okay, so starting with what is a BYOV? Step one, bring your own venue. That means that you do not want to work in one of the registered venues at hollywoodfringe.org/venues. It means you're either looking for like a site-specific space that maybe is leaning toward more of your immersive setting, or it could also mean that you just want to work in a venue that's not currently registered. Maybe that venue doesn't want to do other Fringe shows, but you have a relationship with that venue. That's fine. This is the route you're going to go to. That will mean extra communication with Fringe. If you're bringing your own venue to Fringe, know going in that means you're going to be talking with myself and Ellen and Roddy more often to make sure that you are fully prepared to run a venue during the festival. It means you're going to create your own venue page on the website. It also means that you're going to schedule your own shows. So that means you're wearing producer hat and venue hat. You're kind of doing two separate things at the Fringe, yeah? So that's the logistics. The Fringe venues all must be in the zone. BYOV or otherwise, they still need to be located in the Fringe Zone, which is Franklin to the north, Vermont to the east, Rosewood to the south, and Fairfax to the west. You can look at a map to make that a lot more clear at hollywoodfringe.org/zone. So everything happening in the Fringe is happening in the Fringe Zone. Additionally, if you are traveling, which is allowed, and Monica, who's on the panel today, will be able to speak to some experience on that for sure, you can travel, but you must start and end in the Fringe Zone at a physical address that really does exist that is going to be easy for your audience to find. So keep that in mind. If you want to have a traveling car show, you can do that as long as your audience starts and ends in the same location in the Fringe Zone. Try saying that 10 times fast. So that's the rule there. Additionally, where was I at? So remember, like if you want to work with a more traditional space, it just happens to be a venue that's not a part of Fringe, you're going to listen to the rules I'm giving you here, and then you're going to be able to run with that, knowing that you have a structure, you have walls, you have a traditional venue space that is going to offer a lot more security, and then you have the BYOVs. Maybe you're interested in a coffee shop, a bar, a warehouse, a sidewalk, a park. These are going to be more of the site-specific BYOVs that are going to additionally create something. Maybe you need permitting. Maybe you need permission from neighbors who are also in the area. These are going to be more of your artistic dive-ins, if you will. So with the Fringe, what are those 6 steps? So when it comes to, I want to bring a venue of my own to the Hollywood Fringe, the first thing you're going to do is email support@hollywoodfringe.org. Step number 1, email us, and that way we can start the process along with you. Step number 2, you need to have permission or permitting sometimes to perform in the space. We'll talk a lot more about permissions and permitting later, but know those are things you're going to have in order to bring that space into Fringe. 3, you will need to create a venue page on the website. More details about that as we start to communicate, because remember, you got to reach out to us first. 4th, and this is new starting last year, you will need to fill out a BYOV form. This is our way of communicating exactly what we expect of you and making sure that you have all of those steps in place. Is making sure we know that you have permission from the owner. It's making sure that you've thought about, are there bathrooms on site? Is the space safe for audiences to come? The form is like that. We're not city inspectors, so it's going to be pretty limited, but it's making sure you have a plan. Speaking of, that plan will also include a site visit. Myself or one of the Hollywood Fringe Festival team members will need to visit this location. And again, not city inspectors, but it's our way of making sure that you have a plan, that you have thought
of...
Oh,
hi.
1 second, I'm going to mute real quick. But that site visit is just to make sure that you have a plan and that you've thought through kind of all of the things that can come your way when you're running a venue, which you essentially will be if you're bringing your own. The last thing is going to be insurance. You will have to carry the same insurance as every other show, which is $1 million general liability, but additionally provide a copy of the certificate naming Hollywood Fringe as an additionally insured on that insurance certificate. So often when you do a registered venue at the Fringe, you're going to be added to their rider. There's an option there. With BYOV, you are going to have to obtain that and make sure that we are added to the certificate. But the good news is if you're like, how the hell do I do that? We have resources. So again, the important thing to do is reach out to support@hollywoodfringe.org, and we can help you get you a resource for someone who actually gives discounts to Fringe shows and make sure that you have all of the steps right in front of you to make this a successful experience. Okay, so those are the steps. Now let's talk about permits and permissions, because remember, you are going to likely need these things. So what is permissions? Permissions is going to be what you need if you are working in a space that is privately owned or rented by someone else, right? If you do not own this space, if you want to work in a coffee shop, in a bar, in a restaurant, in a warehouse, and it is owned by someone else, which it is, you need to have permission to be there. And we need to see proof that you have permission to be there. We also recommend that you have a contract if that business does not send you a contract or want to go through that, we recommend highly that you as the artist put together something in writing. It doesn't even have to be, super detailed, but something in writing that says you've agreed upon a certain dollar amount, or maybe free, but either way, you've worked out the details ahead of time so that you don't find out on June 1st that they've decided against the idea, that they're no longer wanting to do that. And I say that because it's happened. So make sure you have things in writing to protect your show. With that, so that's all like personal properties, right? Permits, that's going to be public spaces. And we have some brilliant, Monica is on our panel today who has done so many public spaces, who's going to talk in great detail, but know that that's something you're going to have to consider in public spaces that you may need permitting. So, right, anything that's public. So let's talk about low impact shows in public spaces. More often than not, this can fit into busking rules, which are a lot less dramatic. With busking rules, you do not need a permit in Los Angeles. But you have to, apologies, notifications going off. You have to consider things that you cannot do in a busking rule. You cannot have amplified sound. You cannot block or bother pedestrians or street traffic. They have the right to be there, right? Public space, your show cannot impose upon that. The sidewalks especially, you need to consider the wheelchair access is crucial to be maintained during your presence on that sidewalk. A wheelchair has to be able to still get through even though you're doing your show there. You have to avoid going into private property while you're in these public spaces. So knowing the guidelines there, knowing where private property starts and where public property starts so that you can maintain that world. Or maybe you have a good relationship with the private property that's next door, which is a really good idea because you're likely going to need bathrooms that are available to your patrons, to your team members. So building relationships in the area that you're doing your show is going to be really crucial for a successful festival. Additionally, now this is a weird one, so bear with me. In the rules of busking in Los Angeles, the playing of hurdy-gurdy on the streets of Los Angeles is not allowed. Ask me why, I don't know. Roddy has done a deep dive into this when we started doing busking last year, so please hold on to that. And next time you see Roddy at an office hours, ask the question because it's got to be quite the story. Okay, let's talk higher impact shows in public spaces. This is where permitting is going to be something you are likely going to need to consider and obtain. Larger events with medium to large size crowds. Think about these as events that are going to hinder the public experience in that open space. If it is going to stop whatever is normally happening in that space, you're going to need a permit because that's more of shutting a space down, right? For those sorts of events, the Department of Public Works is going to be your contact. Go through them to obtain permitting that's where you shut down streets or shut down sidewalks or use large spaces, again, where it's about your show. Let's talk public parks. We have had so many shows in public parks at Fringe, and these work in two different ways. You can do permits with public parks, and that's when, again, it's going to impose upon the usual use of the park, or when tickets are being sold. And I think that is key. It is legal to do an activity in a park when it's free, unticketed, and you also follow the rules of no permits necessary, which include you cannot use amplified music. You can't use a PA system. You can't have bands or disc jockeys. You can't have bounce houses. That's key, which is unfortunate because I would love to see a bounce house in a Fringe show. You can't do large tents, catering with like outside food trucks and things like that. You can't have any food for sale or sell any other items within that show. You can't have sports competitions. And again, you cannot sell tickets to do a performance in a park without permitting. You can, however, get permitting to do a show in a park. It's about $25 and you have to do it per day of the performance. So not one permit for the entire run, but $25 per day you plan to perform and submit that about at least 30 days in advance. Although I highly recommend, given the guide print deadline, you submit permits a lot sooner for that. Okay, so that's all of this is detailed work, y'all, and we're going to get so much advice from our panelists who are here today. But know if you're going to do the BYOV route, you're going to have to kind of do your research and figure out where your show fits into this mountain of bureaucracy and rules and find the gray area that is going to work for your show and your artistic experience. So with that, let's turn it over to our amazing panelists who really do have so much expertise ranging from small to large scale work at BYOV, because there's no one size fits all with Fringe at all, but especially not in BYOV. You can go kind of light or you can go massive with your plan. And the panelists today have experience ranging from A to Z on this particular subject. So panelists, if you could pop in, Roddy's going to spotlight you right now. Monica, looks like you get to go first. Hey. All right. If you could introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns, your past Fringe experience, and really a visual description, and then talk about just what you've done at Fringe in the BYOV world and beyond, because you have a lot of experience outside of Fringe.
Yes, sure. My name is Monica Miklas. My pronouns are she, her, and visual description wise, I'm a late 30s white lady with long light brown hair. I'm wearing a cream colored t-shirt and my background is blurred because behind me is my bed. Did Fringe every year for 8 or 9 years, beginning in 2010 with the very first Hollywood Fringe. I was there when it happened. I've been a producer, a performer, I guess just those things, a producer and a performer, and was around during the first years of immersive at Fringe. So the first show I ever did that was immersive at Fringe was called Hamlet Mobile. It was a take on Hamlet staged in and around a converted cargo van that we moved around the festival and tweeted our location like a food truck, which was very in vogue at the time. This is 10 years ago. So that was sort of our claim to fame. And then my theater company, Capital W, and I did a number of other site-specific shows. One other, which was BYOV, and one where we started in a regular Fringe venue, but then we took people in a van to my house, which was in Boyle Heights at the time, and then back to Fringe. So that's what Lois was alluding to earlier, that we took people away, but we brought them back. Outside of Fringe, I've been working for the last few years as a creative director, live entertainment, live experiences for a company based out of New York. And I've been doing immersive work at scale, which is quite different from my normal bread and butter as a theater artist. So kind of I've been working on both ends of the spectrum. Capital W's work is incredibly intimate, incredibly small audience. And then the work I've been doing for the last few years is, hundreds of people at a show, hundreds of people coming through an experience a night. Really, really different. And I've learned a lot through that as well. Yes, I've been in the immersive scene in LA for a long time through various different permit iterations. I've kind of lost track of where we are now with temporary special event permits, but yeah, have been around the block in terms of immersive and in terms of Fringe. So happy to be here to provide whatever I can for all of you who are taking on this journey. It's exciting.
Thank you, Monica. Fun fact for everyone who doesn't know Monica. Monica was around before we had the immersive category at Hollywood Fringe. So needless to say, had a big part in creating that category, building demand at Fringe and in Hollywood in general. So props to Monica for paving the way for so many immersive artists that have come since. Elliot, do you want to take it away?
Sure. My name is Elliot. My pronouns are they, them. I am a white person with long hair, and behind me is a map of Greensboro, North Carolina, and a rack or bookshelf with scenes on it. I am a writer, actor, producer, and last year was my first time producing a show at Fringe. It was called Van Life, and I just want to say, Monica, every single time I told people at Fringe last year that I was doing a show with a van, every single person was like, "Oh, do you know about Hamlet Mobile?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I'm glad that I could finally meet you. But yeah, we staged the production in a parking lot with an actual van, and we had tents. And I think it's a little bit different than it was immersive, but it's not like we didn't pick anybody up. It's not necessarily like Xander's kind of thing where that stuff is like you're really going into the location and moving around. Ours, we had staging, but yeah, super excited to be here and talk about my experience.
We're so happy to have you. And I think your show is a great example of kind of stepping into that world and kind of, especially given your show content, we'll talk more about it as the panel goes on, but being able to kind of have your audiences live in that moment in that way because it was that light immersive. So it absolutely is, and something I think a lot of producers can kind of dip their toes into and it not be overwhelming, right? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Xander.
Elliot.
Or Xander, your turn.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Xander. They, he, she pronouns. I'm a white person. I have shoulder length wavy hair. I'm wearing a gray sweatshirt that says dramatic. And I have a Zoom background of a theater stage. I like to have fun backgrounds when on Zoom. This is my second year producing on top of acting as a performer. Last year was my first time producing and experience designing for Fringe. I created 3 unique shows that all happened during Hollywood Fringe 2024 in this universe I created called the Complaints Department. In a nutshell, the Complaints Department is a multiversal organization that exists through space and time, which uses complaints to improve your reality. And I've attended Fringe many years. I was in a really fun queer musical in 2023 called Cherries Rare and Fair, and I love telling an elevator pitch for it. It's an immersive queer drag burlesque radio theater, dinner theater musical set in the medieval times era. It was such a blast. But yeah, I'm focusing now on immersive and interactive works, and I'm also in the clown community. And I've formed a production company, Chattering Teeth Productions with a Z instead of S, Productions. And I am really focusing on combining immersive, interactive, site-specific stuff with clowning as the type of art that I'm putting out there. And yeah, I'm excited to elaborate on the 3 different complaints department projects I was up to. They were from big scale stuff with so many moving parts and many actors to one of them being a one-on-one experience, super small scale.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you really, I mean, just hit the ground running with that. Like your first time producing at Fringe, you were like, I'm gonna just go, I'm gonna do it all. I'm gonna do it all, and you did, and it was quite impressive. And I love that you say experience because that's what it is, right? Like the art is already an experience, theater is an experience, but adding site specific or immersive is going to really drive that experience home for the audience and allows them to be affected in such a different way. And so let's start with how do you get started? So let's talk finding your venue, your BYOV. Could each of you kind of detail, and some of you have multiple projects you can talk about, but what that step was like from this is my idea, this is what I want to do, to finally securing that space and getting to move from there. Whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. I definitely was not planning on doing 3 different shows last year. I was planning on doing a one-on-one experience, but then I wanted to also do another show of having a community event. And so I came up with the idea to have an award show parody. And when it comes time for the Fringe Award show, it's like there's 300 to 400 shows happening in a Fringe season. I was like, oh, let's be crazy and I'll give an award to every single show, like the type of art that I was doing. I like really wanted to connect the Fringe community. And so I was looking at venues for an award show that feature variety acts and the awards and everything. And I came across the Hobgoblin Playhouse and I did a tour and I was like, oh my God, this is the perfect venue to stage an elaborate walkthrough experience, haunted house style. There were 2 entrances to the lobby. It was a big lobby. There's a hallway. There's 3 doors that can go into the theater. And then the backstage route was so epic that these double doors open and there's a sliding industrial gate that you can slide open. And then it leads to an industrial hallway because the Hobgoblin Playhouse was in a complex with other businesses. So an industrial hallway that leads out to the street. So my creative experience designer brain was like, oh my God. And then I started getting ideas of how I could rotate guest fringers as their characters from their own shows, plugging them in as complaint resolution representatives. So I was just getting so crazy meta. I was like, let's just throw everything at Fringe this year. Is my first time producing and getting a name for my production company. So let's make a splash. And so instantly I started coming up with all these ideas. So I asked the stagecrafts, "Ooh, can I like section off your lobby in half with a backdrop, and can I do a walkthrough show?" And I just started asking them all these questions. Is it okay to check in people outside and front instead of like in the lobby? And so yeah, like for if I mean whether you're using a registered Fringe venue or bring your own venue, like just communication is so key, and just being upfront with your vision and keeping everybody updated. And so that's how I got that venue. And then my bring your own venue for the one-on-ones, I was originally just thinking that I would do it outside. I was really inspired by a show that happened in 2023 called Barry's Gardening Service. Barry's a ventriloquist puppet, and that happened on the street. But I wanted to have intimacy between my character, the supervisor of the complaints department, with guests having one-on-one complaint appointments. And so then I just started brainstorming like where I could do it and have a secure location. And I just started approaching different businesses, and I connected with a business that hadn't heard about I'm keeping the location a secret. I'm actually doing the complaint appointment show again for Fringe this year. So I made a makeshift office. It's an undisclosed location, but yeah, I just connected with a business, and they were all about Fringe and the nuances, and nothing theatrical had ever been done there before. And yeah, it's really cool to form a relationship like that.
Cinder, I love you pointing out that like a lot of the ideas came about once you had a space, like especially with that first piece of your show, like you went in like thinking smaller and then the space inspired so much more. So I love like it's a good reminder to leave room for finding the right space and then letting that space really become a part of the art and a part of the story. Yeah, maybe Elliot, do you want to go next? Only because I think you had a kind of a similar journey in kind of using that traditional and untraditional world to kind of make that journey a little bit easier on the Fringe show.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, me and my co-creator, we had no idea what we were doing. We both have had some theater experience, but we had no idea what we were doing. Still surprised the show happened. But we knew that we wanted it to be in a parking lot, and we knew that we wanted to have a van, and we knew that we wanted it to be immersive. So to find the venue, I think I contacted like every theater. I was going on Google Maps looking for like places with parking lots. We were like scouting locations in the neighborhood, and it was, I don't know, we were just having a pretty difficult time because we would find a space that we really liked, and then it would fall through. And we ended up renting this parking lot outside of the Jack's Theater. And it just, we thought we were gonna want a bigger space, but we got there and it was just perfect. And the play is set in Venice Beach, and they just had like this beautiful beach mural there. So it was just really, I don't know, it just felt very, very special. And yeah, it was really, I think, getting into the space and really seeing it, because we had a general design with some tents. We kind of knew what we wanted, but I think it was the more we were in the space, and even once we got the van, once it just like completely transformed everything. And I think a lot of that, like the choices came out in rehearsals. And yeah, I think just I don't know. Like I said, I've never produced another play before, like in this capacity, and I just feel like, especially if it's like you're bringing your own venue, you have to be able to be really flexible, and like kind of like Xander was talking about, just like being really communicative, and like just, I don't know, seeing what happens and like just fully diving into it. Yeah, yeah, and I think we also, if we were to do things differently, I think that we would have maybe branched out to I'm really happy we found the space that we did, but also I think it would have been cool to like reach out to parks, because I think that was because of the nature of our show, which involved homeless young people. That would have been cool too. So I just think there's so much you can do. I don't know. I had so much fun.
Yeah, and I want to take it back. I said, you took the it's a slightly easier road, and it really wasn't. I remember you reaching out to so many parking lots and hitting dead ends. So you really you busted your ass and you made it happen. You and your team, all of the props. Can I ask a quick follow-up question for those that are looking to go the route of just like cold calling or cold emailing? What were the major bullet points that you asked in those initial emails to try and retain these parking lots from places you didn't know?
Yeah, we were just very brief but specific about what we were looking for, obviously saying that we were a part of the Fringe and, a brief synopsis because what we were really trying to find people also who kind of believed in the story that we were telling. But because everything is and I think we started looking for venues maybe in February or March, beginning of March, and it was hard to get responses a lot of the time. So we sent emails, we called, and I think we followed up with every place multiple times. So I think just persistence and everyone's really busy. So it's I think with most things in the industry, it's put as much information as you can in the subject line, just so people will see it. They know that you're looking, you need this space, you have, maybe this budget or, this is what you need. And yeah, just go from there.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Monica, so many shows to choose from here.
I know. I mean, with Hamlet Mobile, we like Elliot, like you, we sort of started with the van and then went from there. I will say a lot of the times I was doing weird venues at Fringe, it was before the current era of things. It was a little bit more Wild West at the time. So with Hamlet Mobile, it was true guerrilla theater. We didn't have permission. We were just parked on the street. I mean, we were just in regular parking spaces. But perhaps that's a bygone era. We'll see. Yeah, play by ear. And then we would spill onto the sidewalk, but followed the busking rules, and so never had a problem working on the sidewalk and doing basically just street theater, as you do. We did a show called Red Flags where we started in a bar. There was an option. The audience member had it was a one-on-one show. It's set up like you're going on a first date, and what we promise people is it's a bad first date, hence Red Flags. And for that one, it was sort of a simpler time. I remember just going around the Fringe Zone and talking to bouncers. Typically, this was definitely before the time when you needed written permission, which I think is wise. That to be part of the Fringe structure, I think that's a great development. This was before that time. So really, we just kind of walked around and talked to people. So in addition to, as Elliot said, sending emails, phone calls, there's sometimes no substitute for just showing up in person and being friendly and asking people hey, what's going on? Hey, who could I talk to? That tended to work pretty well for us. I'll say also in terms of finding venues, not just at Fringe, but for other projects where we've had to find very specific types of locations, specific types of parks, that kind of thing. I do a lot of map scouring, just looking on Google Maps and kind of going block by block, even of what is that building? What is that building? What is going on here? What is going on here? Google Maps is really an incredible tool when you're scouting because you can kind of get a hit list and then go out in person and actually start going through it. You could do your site visits, but you start and do some of that work before you're out there driving around. So you get a sense of where you're going.
Yeah, I love that. And what you're talking about, right? We've added a small step and a lot of it just to give everyone kind of an idea of what that is. Because yeah, Monica's not wrong. We were as a festival figuring so much out. And really, I mean, the scene I think was there weren't a lot of rules because there wasn't a lot of people doing it. So there was not, really any issue there. And when it comes to the permission forms, it's really just making sure that you are following the steps that Monica did with her show already. She talked to the businesses that she was going to be interacting with or nearby. So it's us just making sure we're doing the due diligence of checking off the box of, yeah, you have the relationships, because really that's what it is making sure that you are not surprising anyone or impacting their potential money. That's key, right? We are living in a rough time in our world. people are not making the money they used to. Businesses aren't doing well. So they don't give anyone reason to be angry. In fact, what a great reason to connect with a business and be like, hey, I can bring my audience into your coffee shop. I can bring my audience into your bar. Can we use your restroom before the audience, starts their journey? And then I'll make sure that we're coming back and filling your seats. Like, so building those relationships is so important. Monica, can we deep dive a little bit into like sidewalk and like kind of the busking? Yep. Because we do see a lot of that at Fringe, and it's not a show, but sometimes just an end a show. So what are some of the things that you can do as a producer to make sure that you are being a good sidewalk performer?
Yes, and a good sidewalk citizen.
Yes.
Yeah, this is really important to me. So I think it's really important when you're busking or doing street theater that you are respectful of the other people around you. That's kind of the baseline name of the game. Some of that is codified in law, like you cannot physically block the sidewalk. You can't prevent people from using the sidewalk by law, which is it's like, I'm all about laws when they're just, and that feels like a good one. That's a good one. And then there are noise, that's something. And then there are the other ways that you can be a good citizen when you're busking. Even if the sidewalk is technically passable, is it easy for people to get by? Make sure there's that. Think about what you're doing and how big a crowd you expect to draw. And then are you at the best place for that? For instance, in Hollywood, there are a few places right in the middle of the Fringe Zone where the sidewalks are basically double their normal width. I believe one is on Cahuenga, just south of Santa Monica. There's a huge kind of double wide sidewalk there. It's perfect for street theater. There's no businesses. Like we did our like major scenes there because we knew people could still get by even if we had a pretty big crowd. We didn't do that like giant scenes in front of what was, you wouldn't want to do a giant scene on the sidewalk in front of the broad wire. That's not being a great, yeah, there's lots of eyes on you, but there's lots of people who are minding their own business. They're doing their thing. They were having conversations. They're going to their shows. There's people queuing up for shows. If you're going to work in that way, that's not a big, all eyes on me type of space. That's if you did want to use that space, it's small, it's quiet. You're weaving in and out. So thinking about context. Also thinking about how you will control traffic and how you will control foot traffic. Having someone who is not in the performance, the producer, the director, someone who has no other job except to sort of manage the situation, and heaven forbid would be the person to deal with an issue if it arose, whether that's just somebody giving you a hard time, or that's somebody who can't get by, or that's people are spilling onto the street. There's someone around who's gently going around tapping people on the shoulder, being hey, we actually need to keep everybody on the street. Thanks so much. Oh, hey, we actually need to keep this open because that's the law. Thanks. You can do that in a super friendly way. The last thing I'll say about being a good sidewalk citizen is knowing the neighborhood that the Hollywood Fringe is in and knowing what kind of folks live in that neighborhood. There are a lot of unhoused folks in Hollywood, and the sidewalk is often where they live. And so we have to be extra respectful of the fact that that is a shared public and private space for some people. And we need to be extra aware of that. I'll briefly tell a story that I won't say what year it was, who it was, blah, blah, blah. But I saw a show at Fringe once where I got uncomfortable. It was an immersive show out on the street that was sort of like a walking tour. And it started right by a services center for people who are experiencing homelessness. And the content of the show was all about some kind of plague or a disease, or I don't know. It felt really weird to be at a place where we were outside a place where people are going in and out. I think often to receive HIV services too. And it just felt disrespectful. And then there was another point in the show where they had set up a tent on a street 20 feet away from where someone was sleeping in a tent. And that was their performance space. But the other tent was where someone lives. And that also felt weird. It felt not respectful of the people around us. And Elliot, I'd actually be really curious to hear your thoughts on that, because it sounds like that was what the show you made sort of dealt with some of those issues too. But all that's to say is, like, it's not that you can't talk about issues of homelessness, but if you think about where you are and think about the context you're in and who the other people are who share that space with you, and if they walked by and heard your show, what would they think? That's my spiel.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you mentioned that because, I mean, our show was it got very, very chaotic in the plot of the play, and we like even when we were trying to find, we were looking at this one space, this one parking lot that we really wanted, and we didn't end up getting that space, but it was like we were making a point to like be like, okay, people live here, like going into businesses. It's like like if you're performing in public like that and there's unhoused people, yeah, I think it's really important to go up and let them know what's going on. And so because we were also in an area where there were a couple of unhoused people and we got to know multiple people and a few of them came to see the show. And it's yeah, I think being respectful is really important. And we had a tent on the sidewalk. We had like a prop tent and everything, but we kept it, it still has to be accessible. People need to be able to walk by or bring a wheelchair or mobility device through that. And yeah, I think it's and also with van life, it was very there was a lot going on, but there was an audience. It was like very clearly like people were watching something happen. And I think if you're doing like an immersive show and there's, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's just really important to be mindful and just to treat everybody with respect. I like what you said about the public private space because that is so important.
The other thing I'll add here is, from a broader immersive perspective, is that people, passersby, may not know this is a show. And if you're doing stuff that's in public space, people will assume it is real. And I had a very scary incident once that involved 6 cop cars showing up at my house with guns drawn because they saw something happen in a show and someone reported a kidnapping and there was like a helicopter. It was crazy and very, very scary and very dangerous. So people assume things are real if they're happening in public. And so if there's stuff that's charged, figure out how you're going to keep people safe, including bystanders, including your own performers or participants, from what bystanders may think.
100%. And I remember that year. And honestly, I think that is something so important. Like if you were to take one thing away from today's workshop, y'all, it's having respect for the uncontrollable spaces, because there is a big difference between having a venue space at Actors Company where you have venue managers, you have tech people, you have other shows coming in and out. You have the understanding of anyone walking by going, that's a theater. There's acting things happening there, versus even being in like a parking lot. Elliot, like your show was in a more controlled space, but it was visible to anyone walking by. And so very much you had to plan, of course, like A, B, C, D, and what is going to happen and how can I mean, you plan ahead with these like producers. That is your job, right? To plan ahead, to think through every potential worst case scenario. But then there's going to be 5 that you didn't see coming. And so having like good communication with your team and doing the best you can to minimize potential, especially danger. And I want to bring it back to something Monica said earlier, is having somebody present who at least plays that role, right? Some venues have security. So who on your team is not responsible for being in character, continuing the performance in some way, and just managing and keeping eyes on your performers? I think that was something too, the show that you're referring to that I will also refrain from, but like that can be very scary if your performer is in character, but in a situation that, again, people who are existing do not know, that can put the performer in a lot of danger. So being very cautious and overly aware of the potential, what things look like so that your performers are safe. And Xander, I think you can speak to this as well, and that and I'm gonna go off. Yeah, make sure your mic's on in case I start to say anything that you don't want out there, because I know there's a lot of secrets still in place for your show. Just start screaming, and I'll okay. So that way I don't out any brilliance that you want to bring to this year's Fringe. But you do some sidewalk work in character, where it is very hard to tell if you are in character performing or otherwise. Can you speak to that and how you handled the unforeseen?
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to totally bring that up and chime in about the sidewalkness and also being able to tell if there's a performance or not. My character, the supervisor, has a very freaky looking prosthetic, like old man face. So people either are like, oh, this is like out there theater, or they're like, oh my God, like this person is crazy, like whatever, this weirdo. But something to know that if you're a bring your own venue, you get a big foam board of your venue number. And so a lot of the bring your own venues, I'd say it's like a stationary spot. And so they'd put their sign up. But my venue being undisclosed, I was like, well, I don't want to just have my venue sign like where it is. And I had been thinking about having some sort of rolling desk because my show starts outside. People meet me under the no truck sign, which is across from no truck signs over 6,000 pounds across from the Broadwater. And so I knew that there'd be a little bit of walking. And so when it was the foam board, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get a rolling podium desk and I'm going to put my venue sign on the desk. And so I'm a roaming venue that then leads to my stationary venue. And so between my like total characterized physical appearance and then rolling around with this very apparent sign that said Hollywood Fringe Venue 18, that, yeah, I had no problem with anything. And people walking past people on the street, people would either get a kick out of what was happening. And my character, it's super interactive with anybody, like totally saying hi to people, like very happy-go-lucky. Or just if it wasn't people saying, then they'd just quickly walk past, not make eye contact. But it really helped having the sign. It was really cool. Yeah.
I love that. And did you find it was kind of a marketing tool as well?
Yeah.
So something that there, yeah.
Yeah, people are just like, "Wait, you're a venue?" Or like, "What is this?" I'm just like rolling around and people are like, "Is this just outside?" I'm like, "No, we're on our way to my office."
Yeah. It's right. I mean, you brought questions to their minds, and a lot of people, I think, sought out the answers by way of going to your show. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love. And okay, so we've gone through kind of a lot of like the really scary things, and again, we want to always consider the worst case scenarios. But then there's also the things that are maybe not like life or death, or like going to put somebody's like body in danger. But like if you're in an outdoor space, and Elliot, I know you can speak to this, June is normally June gloom. Like we are in general, I mean, I've been through 14 fringes now, and it's like got perfect weather, arguably. Like, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it doesn't rain. And then there was this last year's fringe where, good God, there was about 3 days where it was hot as balls. And so, Elliot, how did you take care of your cast, your audience? And like, did you see that coming, or was that a quick pivot for you?
It was so freaking hot. We were praying for the June gloom consistently. And yeah, like you said, there were a couple of performances that were just so hot that it was the cast was getting delirious. I know that the audience was baking right there with us to kind of, and part of something that I wish we would have thought about more was all of our shows took, because we were like, I don't want to pay for lighting. So it's like, we'll just do our shows in the afternoon or we wanted to do them earlier in the day, but because of the schedule with the venue, we could only do them at like 3 or 4 o'clock, like the historic heat wave in LA. And so we provided, because we really wanted to if we were asking people to sit outside for 90 minutes for a show, we just wanted to, I think we gave people like sunscreen, and we had like bottles of water and coolers just for people. I think we had, I don't know if we had fans, but we got pop-up tents, and there's only so much you could do. But the cool thing was that it did create this effect where it was like, well, the characters can't go inside on a hot day. This is just their life. So it did create like the atmosphere that was a little more immersive than we intended. But yeah, I think if you're gonna go outside, definitely think about the time of day and prepare for that to happen. And then just I think what really helped is people, because we were very clearly trying to like make people comfortable. I think people were a lot more willing to engage with the story and with the whole thing because they can, they're being taken care of as much as we can. So yeah, thank you for I forgot about that. That's crazy.
I did not mean to bring that trauma back up at all. But I could say I was genuinely, because I was there, I think, on the hottest day of the festival. And I was very, very impressed with how you handled that. Like, I felt taken care of as an audience, and I saw like your full team, and I just felt so bad for the cast who was running around. But I could definitely see that you did everything possible to make sure people were as comfortable and safe as possible. You kept people hydrated. And I agree. It was one of those, like, I heard one person complaining and I was like, well, imagine not being able to leave the show. Like, like, and I did think, like, I was grateful just as a human to experience that human experience in that way. And that made the show really sink in. But legally, I'm so thrilled at how you took care of the audience and made sure they were safe throughout the process too. Let's continue to talk about audience safety, but switch into kind of the comfort side of things. And so we're going to lean, again, most of our BYOVs do lean immersive, and all of your shows had an element of immersive theater. So how did you prepare your audience, not necessarily, like I said, safety, but in making sure they understood what to expect and they could show up on time, prepared for whatever that experience was going to be, but without spoiling the surprises? Whoever wants to jump in first, feel free.
I could take that. This also gets into, this has a marketing component. I think that advertising properly what people can expect at your show. Are they going to need to be moving around? Are they going to be in one place all the time? Will they need to go upstairs or downstairs or get in a vehicle? All those kind of things. I think there's a huge benefit to the field, to making work that is as accessible as possible. And at the edge of that, I think there is room to play with things that are, like, for instance, like getting in and out of a van. Like, that is not accessible for every audience member. Does that mean you should never do a show where that's required? I don't know. That's a thing reasonable folks could have a great debate about. But we landed on the place of, like, no, we're going to make it accessible as we can, given the physical reality of the space that we're working in and of the core experience. So part of it's marketing. And then once people arrive on site, reiterating any sort of comfort needs that they need to know up top. For immersive, for me, that's often, when will folks be able to use the restroom, and where are they accessible during the show? Are they accessible before the show? Sometimes, like in our work, oftentimes they're not accessible before the show, but then they are during, because you're in the playing space. So we tell people exactly what the deal is. Like, you will have an opportunity between this time, and then again at this point. And in the middle, no go. Plan your life. And then also access to water, I think, is a big one as well. And then you get into onboarding things like, occasionally with immersive, like claustrophobia comes up, like actual physical phobias. If it's like that level of, I tend to warn people at the marketing stage and point of sale and when they arrive. If it's things that are more content related, I tend to try to do a good job of letting people, like emotional safety. I tend to try to write a good description that will let people know, like, the level of seriousness of the show, and then let them figure it out from there. But again, that's one where, like, reasonable people can have a reasonable debate about what the best practice is.
Yeah, absolutely. Go in, Xander.
Yeah, theatrical in-world onboarding. I mean onboarding in general, but with like immersive, I feel like it's best to have an in-world like in the terminology and the vibes and everything. So for all my shows, the complaints department customer service emailed audience guests, and for the walkthrough show, which was like the haunted house style, going through the entire venue that we customized, the like little elevator pitch description for that show I really thought about to just try to get it somewhat clear for people going in. So I said that experience was a wonderland of red tape corporate office satire run by an array of zany characters and clowns via immersive, interactive, ever-changing world elements. And I mean, that is a lot of gobbledygook, but then people that went through it, they're like, oh my God, that really was accurate, because they were going to these different worlds and these different spaces, and it was like a rotating cast of all these performers. But yeah, in our onboarding emails would say like when, where, what, bathroom, very much, yeah, relevant. I wanna read the description of our bathroom thing. And this was what guests were sent for the walkthrough and the one-on-one complaint appointments. Please use the bathroom before you arrive. For the complaint appointments, we said that there's restrooms at Hudson Cafe and the Broadwater. If you decide to use the bathroom during your complaint appointment time, or we are not liable for any metaphysical damages resulting from being sucked into an eighth dimensional multiverse where you will be swarmed by toxic positivity. And so, yeah, I didn't want people using the bathroom for the complaint appointments because it's like around a 30-minute experience. So I didn't want to take time away from that. But my own venue did have a bathroom because, yeah, you have to have a bathroom. And the Hobgoblin Playhouse, we didn't want people using the bathroom at all if possible, because we were needing to set up everything. And then with the show going through, it'd be awkward for audience members to pass like these intricate moments. And then, yeah, I actually don't know if we ever had bathroom logistics for the walkthrough show. But the awards show was chill. Like the lobby was a lobby and people could use the bathroom without disrupting anything. And then, yeah, claustrophobia, the complaint appointments in the makeshift office. It's a small space, so in my description I said if you're uncomfortable with enclosed spaces, this may not be the experience for you. But yeah, just like as much detail as you can without, if you're trying to keep something secretive, then sure, keep it secretive, but also like any important stuff, like making it clear of like, oh yeah, this is a walking experience. For some of the time you're going to be standing. For some of the time you're going to be in an elevator, but like the show is accessible. And for the walkthrough show, our box office was outside, and I had an actor that was in world box office receptionist, like at the rolling podium desk, and she was checking people in, but then she was also doing in world onboarding and doing icebreaker activities and just keeping flow happening before we would open the theater door and let people in. So yeah, that's a nutshell of how I handled all that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it is important to talk about like accessibility. Monica, you're so right. Like diving it back into what you were saying about like some shows are not going to be accessible. And that is okay, y'all. And I think it's really learning how to be like give full disclosure to your audience. And that's what's important on the Fringe end. Like we do have flags set up on the website over the last couple of years. This is actually pretty new, Monica, but our goal is to be fully transparent. That way nobody walks into a space and is surprised by the lack of accessibility or the lack of comfort they experience in that space. And so I think like it's just about being completely honest, naming your limitations. Don't try to do something you haven't tried before. Like a dry run is always a good idea. Think through it, do it yourself and go, can all of these things reasonably happen before inviting an audience into that space? Because building trust is how you keep an audience. I think that's more of like a big picture artist point to make is if your audience loses trust in you, if they come to your show and nothing is how it was described, they don't want to come back. They don't like, and I'm going to name as someone who I fucking adore immersive theater, but I'm terrified of it. Like it is absolutely like it's something that's kind of known. I love it with every fiber of my being. I fought to have it be added as a category when I was on staff at the time. But I get very nervous. It does not, every part of my person just wants to crawl up into a ball and cry a little bit. And so it is really helpful when I'm able to kind of to read about the show to find out like, okay, the more I know, the more comfortable I am because I'm that level of OCD. And so when I'm surprised, I do tend not to go back, not because I don't think the work is amazing, but because I know that I'm going to have a wee panic attack. And that show is not for me. So I think, yeah, honesty. Okay, Elliot, so sorry to jump in there. And if you don't mind, talk about, like, we're talking about onboarding. Can you add in your really special offboarding that you did with your show? Because I think that is something that is just worth like shouting from the rooftops. I thought it was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, y'all are both like bringing up so many good points that I totally forgot. But yeah, I just want to reiterate, and especially if your show is dealing with like very sensitive content or like controversial stuff, definitely you want to give people all of the content warnings, give people I think it's really important with immersive theaters to just let people know like they don't have to participate. And if there's like a way that you can say like, hey, if you don't want to participate, hold your hand up, or do something like that, because it's not for everybody. And for instance, with van life, it was on those really hot days we would let people know like, okay, you come here and we will provide these things for you, but just it's gonna be freaking hot because it's June. And yeah, the offboarding. Yeah, so one thing that was really important for our production is kind of we were trying to do like a Brechtian thing, but we ended each show by distributing hygiene kits to each audience member and then telling them like, okay, now you go out and you give this to one of your unhoused neighbors in LA. And I think that, and with having the actors also, just from the moment people, because we were trying to create the atmosphere of like you're here in the parking lot, you're with these characters. So just having the actors just in character the whole time, I think doing that and then closing it off with like giving people a mission. I think I don't know. I keep thinking about how like creating atmosphere is so important, especially I think with like BYOV, because it's, you go into a theater and you kind of know you're going to be in a theater, but like anything you can do to kind of like bring people closer into the world, I think is really important.
Yes, 100%. And I love an action item. I think especially like we live in a world where we're desperate for an action item, right? We're having constant debates and there's so much shit happening. And I think the more that art is able to, of course, provide like that opportunity to change your heart, your mind, but then also what to do next. I think that is so important to really keep that motivation forward. So yeah, I was just very impressed. I kind of want to stick to the conversation of safety, but take it kind of back to the rehearsal process for immersive work. So when it comes to, we've been talking about how to make sure your audience is protected, how to make sure in the moment of performance, your artists are protected. How do you rehearse for those unforeseen, like more emotional safeties? Like how do when you don't know what the audience is going to do when you're immersed in that. I see Monica talking. If you want to jump right in, I know you have so many stories here.
Yeah, this was one of my favorite things. Yeah, immersive rehearsal processes are really special and they really require a lot of actors because I have found, I'd be curious, Xander and Elliot, if you have found this as well. I think there is the line between performer and character is thinner. It's a blurrier boundary in immersive than it is on stage because as you improvise, you're having to pull so much from yourself to be there in the moment with the audience. And you're engaging in eye contact. You're right there with them. Like your body is so much more on the line. And so you feel things in a different, much deeper way. So the first step of that safety is creating for lack of a better term, a safe space in rehearsal where everyone can kind of, just come as they are. And also really encouraging people to develop a practice of letting it go at the end of the day. You really can't dwell in it. You have to onboard, offboard from the rehearsal day. And then we do a lot of scenarios in our work. So when we get into the place where we're running sections of the show, we have people who aren't in that scene, or we have the director or the producer, the stage manager, whoever else is in the room. They play audience members. And when I'm directing, I usually give those people secret assignments of like, hey, I need you to be like, I'll take them aside and be like, I need you to be the audience right now, and I need you to be a good audience member because that performer's still getting their sea legs, and I need you to just like be a supportive audience member, let them practice what that feels like. Or it might be like, they're ready. I need you to never stop talking. Like, don't shut up. Or I need you to like try to break the show. There's also, or like be a snotty kid. There's all sorts of things, and it can be really fun. And then you kind of let them loose, and you just keep playing it and keep testing it. And then you go into test audiences where it is the public, but it's like we like to do kind of like friends and family test audiences. So they're super friendly audiences that aren't going to try to break the show unless we tell them to. And you do that for a few rounds of play testing, and then you go to real people. So it's like layers and layers of building up your skills before you get to actual people who inevitably will do something you didn't expect. And you just have to be ready to roll, whatever that may be.
And I think it's really worth noting, pay attention to who your audience is. Like, is your audience going to spend the hour before your show at a bar? That's going to change how they exist in that space. And also with Fringe, remember, like I think it's a pro and a con because I've seen it work for better and worse. But a lot of your audience are going to be artists. Sometimes that means they play really nicely. Other times it means they like the spotlight, and that can really
fanciful audience members often at Fringe compared to the normie world.
Yeah, so you almost have these additional like rehearsed players without the plan to have that in the space.
And also people you may know. People, if you're part of the Fringe community, people you may know quite well, which also does something different to the performance. Of like, how do you react when it's like a good friend or like a really strong acquaintance from Fringe world part?
Yeah, 100%. Xander, how did you handle that? You wore so many hats. Like, how did you practice leading up to your final performances?
Yeah, well, any sort of immersive work that's heavily interactive and is audience interactive, like what Monica was saying, you have to play test because even if you know all the mechanics and the actors need people to practice not only like riffing with, but then seeing the physical dynamics of people moving around and stuff. And yeah, just you can just plan, but like once audiences come in, like no, it's so essential to have play tests because then so many things come to light. Yeah, we just play test, did our dress rehearsal. We had test audience coming through, family and friends, as Monica was saying. Is there anything else you want me to expand on?
Curious, because you did have one-on-one, which changes the dynamic quite a bit as well. Did you have like, can you speak to anything that really surprised you in the one-on-one without like using names or anything? But was there anything you encountered that you were like, oh fuck, I did not think that was going to happen, and speak to how like you pivoted to make it work? And maybe not. That's fine too, right?
I don't mind giving this away that the business that I ended up partnering with, we have to go through like active working parts of the business to get to my intimate closed off little space. And the couple of staff members at first, like two of them were like, oh yeah, I don't mind like light interaction because the supervisor acknowledges everyone. And so after doing it once or twice with one of the staff members, and they're like, hey, actually, like I'm not so comfortable with like the heavy interaction, like just be like hi or thank you or whatever. I was like, oh, okay, cool. But one of the staff people has a acting and film background, and so I'm always hoping that he's the one that I pass because it's so fun riffing with him. And then it's just so incredible of like having an immersive show where it's like it's wild that it's like people in this business are like now part of the mechanics. But yeah, no, but like overall, like yeah, no, things have been so smooth. Yeah,
I love it.
very
And
very grateful.
yeah, right, knock on wood. But I do love that, yeah, this undisclosed location, but the people who worked there were day players. Like, you never knew who you were going to get, and it changed the experience for you and, of course, your audience, but your audience was none the wiser because they likely didn't see, version A. And so I think that's so fun and kind of creates a fun element for the artist to come in and go, ooh, which one am I going to get today?
And same with just the people that frequent the business and stuff. But it's like, it's always been positive interactions. And yeah, anyways, I just put a really good aura out as the supervisor, and that really helps, that he is just so like approachable and heartwarming and so like, yeah, cheerleader to everybody. So
Yeah, I think that helps. Yeah, you absolutely did really set, especially like so much of your audience you met, I mean, at office hours and these events leading up to it. So you really set the tone for what was to come, which I could see shine from the beginning stages to like, oh my God, it's, the first time I saw the costume to finally seeing the show. It felt like this full journey with this character. So I'm excited that more people are going to get to experience it. We're going to kind of like switch gears lightly, but stay in the same world. Because Elliot, you had it wasn't like a fully immersive piece, but there were certainly elements that pulled the audience in. So like we talked about, for my more wimpy immersive self, this is the perfect balance where I can go and take part in a little bit, but not so much. Can you talk about how like you started with the script and started to develop these pieces into the show to create that immersive light?
Yeah. The story came into being kind of actually because I was in 2022, I was just going to a lot of Fringe shows, and I was like, okay, this is where the art has been in LA. That's crazy. And so I saw a couple of immersive pieces, and I really wanted to do something like that because I've done site-specific theater, but never produced anything. And so it just started. I was like, I want there to be a play involving homeless people who live in a van, and I want the van to be broken, and I want people to have to push the van across the stage to move it. And that's kind of where it's like, this is the mechanics or the gimmick of what I wanted to do. And then the script, I had a really great co-writer. And once we kind of got like the plot and everything, and we had the first drafts, and we had something like, okay, this is a story we wanted to tell, we would routinely go through it and be like, what, like more, how can we like maximize this? And just any ways that we could like engage the audience. And again, people were sitting down the entire time for the most part. There were some, except when people were moving the van. But yeah, I think just anytime we could make the audience a character kind of, or make the set a character even, we like made pancakes for everybody. And like I don't even remember, we passed out a bunch of stuff. People were coming on stage. There were some I think very difficult scenes that were very realistic from the feedback that we got, which is great. But because they were so intense, just thinking about like safety in rehearsals and stuff like that, and what Monica, you were saying about just like being able to like off board afterwards is really important. And just taking care of each other, and like having, like, we spent a lot of time as an ensemble. We did a lot of like book work for like a month and a half, just like going through it, having conversations, getting to know each other. And I think that really, like, building that trust really helped. And also because we knew we were going to be outside, we made a point to, we held rehearsals on our roof, just so that we could, have an idea of like, this is what it's going to be like. We did not anticipate it being that hot, but I think that was really helpful. Yeah, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, yeah, the food was such a fun bit because, right, it was one of those, like, I didn't feel like a character in it, but I felt like I did feel like a character in it. I just didn't feel responsible for anything. I think maybe that was the shift in my like brain, is I didn't feel like I could make or break the show, but I got to still be a character in it, which was a very safe space for me. And I think for others as well, they got to kind of dip their toes in, which was really delightful. Okay, and I think we didn't really cover this, but it's a quick point I'd love to make. Did any production have like a safe word or something that they used in those worst case scenarios? Monica, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember if Hamlet Mobile did. For every show we've ever done, we have an emergency plan, like a safety plan. It doesn't like sometimes a safe word is part of that safety plan, but it need not be. It isn't always that mechanism, but we always have in place what do you do if something makes you uncomfortable? What do you do if, somebody falls down and cuts themselves? Like that kind of emergencies, those kind of emergencies happen too. Yeah. Do you route to the stage manager? Do you route to the producer? It's been different in every show. The most important thing is just that you have a plan. It doesn't need to look like anybody else's plan. It just needs to be something that is simple and that everyone knows. Those are the biggest components. Like I worked on an immersive show on a cruise ship once where we had like people were holding up numbers on fingers of like how, and I was like, guys, this is insane. Like, we can't do this. It is like, I need help or it's show stop. Those are the symbols. That's it. So you can flex it depending on what your scenario is. For red flags, we didn't have a box office. It's the audience member would arrive and just meet the performer. So we had someone else in the same space with them, but who wasn't like watching them necessarily, but who was always right nearby and always parked in the same spot. So the performer, if they ever had a problem, they would literally just walk away and come to the stage manager person. So that works too. Like a physical system can also work. Happy to talk more about how different numbers of things do. I'll stop there.
No, I love it. I feel like, right, but it's something that maybe people don't think about until the moment of like, I wish I had this, because you can get lost in the story. That's the beautiful thing about artists, right? In the midst of a story, you do get lost in the act. And then sometimes it's easy to miss like the discomfort or, my God, are they really in the moment today? When in fact, maybe they're really in trouble and they're just not able to say that. So having a symbol or a word in place to make that very clear is always a good idea. And Helen, any cast, right? It doesn't have to be immersive. Like
Totally.
Make it easy for your cast to communicate how they're doing and check in. I think there's something really beautiful about, just like Elliot, you said, like your cast had really bonded. And I think it's important to have that in any artistic space going in, especially Fringe, where like y'all are going to be exhausted at the end of June. You're going to have so much like, or so little like mental, emotional, physical like capacity left, that the more, especially the primary producer, can take it upon themselves to check capacity. We do it at Fringe with our team. Like, hey, how is the capacity? Are we doing okay? Because no one is able to do good work if they're at capacity. So in general, a good way to keep everyone safe, happy, and doing their best work is have these systems in place. So this is kind of a similar vibe, but did anyone do liability waivers at Fringe or otherwise to make sure things are legally covered?
Can I touch on safe words real quick?
Please.
For our, we didn't have a safe word for the award show because it was just like a regular proceeding show. Leave if you want to. The walkthrough show, we had a safe word, and moving space to space. There were 3 audience groups that went through in a show day, overlapping. Well, not overlapping, but assembly line style. And they each had a tour guide that was taking them to each space, and then stuff would happen in the space. And so either the tour guide, if an issue came up, could then leave the space to talk to people, or we did have a production assistant that could also help with escorting. But to my knowledge, I don't think we ever had to escort anyone out. I know that like at least one person just left on their own accord. Well, yeah. So I guess that like yeah, they were told like go this way, and then the one-on-one, it was just like me and the person. What?
There was a kitty cat. I'm so
Oh! I didn't see it.
so sorry.
Yeah. The one-on-one, I just said I want to the audience member, I want out, or just like say whatever. And also, no one that ever did any of my experience got triggered by the mask, but people just at office hours or just seeing the mask, like a lot of people have like mask phobias or just especially whatever that looked like. But someone saying I want out or whatever with like the one-on-one experience, like I was totally ready to just take off the mask and then totally like drop my character voice and everything. But there was never any issue with that. But I'd say that it's also really important for immersive and interactive work, especially if there's an actor ever with with an audience member, but like production can see from a way to have a sign when like an actor wants out or needs something adjustment. So I find the typical thing with and like interactive work is for an actor to go like that, but also like have an audience member go like that too. And yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I love your actually, and you mentioned because yours is like physically a mask. You take the mask off, but I love just like the metaphor that brings up is it can be like physical or otherwise, where like sometimes it's not the surroundings or the situation that can freak out an audience member. Sometimes it's the character. It gets too real, it hits a trauma point that they didn't expect, and they emotionally can't do it anymore. And so I love just like that reminder of like you literally took off the mask, but I think that can be like not a physical thing for other people, but yeah, take off the character mask for a second if it gets to that unsafe space with an audience member. I love that. Perfect. We want to liability waivers. You've done them before, Monica, you said?
I have. Yeah, I will preface all of this by saying I'm not an attorney.
Me either.
Yeah. So if like you're getting into work that feels really charged or like you want to touch people, that kind of stuff, like that's where I tap out. Choke up my hair. And now my husband's laughing at me. Sorry, guys. But some people do want to make work like that. If that is the type of work you want to make, I would suggest you consult an attorney, because my understanding of liability waivers is that someone signing a waiver is not going to prevent you from getting sued if something bad happens. It will be a piece of evidence in court if something bad happens and you are sued, which of course you don't want. You want to take every step possible to keep people safe so it never comes to that point. But sometimes stuff happens. So we don't do them for every show. It's been kind of a mix across all of Capital W's work. Stuff that's short, like Hamlet Mobile, we didn't. Stuff that's more casual, we don't tend to. For Rochester 1996, it was a 3-hour journey where we drove people around in a van. We had people sign waivers. So it's kind of your best judgment of like how involved is your work and what are you asking the audience? And like, honestly, the thing that's probably most likely to happen would be like a slip and fall, that's like somebody trips. Like that's way more likely than something catastrophic happening. This also kind of gets into a question of like, if you're getting into more crazy stuff, how have you set up your business? Like, is it just you? Because there are also liability issues around, like if, for instance, you want to do like an extreme haunt at Fringe, maybe that's your thing. You would probably want to set up a type of business to support that's going to limit your personal liability, as opposed to like us being a partnership, which is basically a sole proprietorship, but we were never doing things that were crazy. But if you want to get weird, talk to a lawyer.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for the most part, like most Fringe shows are not going to dip into this area at all. Like the point of asking these questions, y'all, is because we don't want the Fringe to be the end of any journey, right? This is hopefully maybe the start to a larger show that goes full scale where you are going to have to start thinking about these things. So we want that education of like, okay, so here's the 10 things that I want to have in place for my Fringe show. And then knowing the next stage of this piece is going to be the next 10 things. And maybe that is liability waivers. Maybe that is setting up an LLC so that you can start to create these grander visions. But just, steps to consider in the future. I would love to talk pros and cons, like, because I think a lot of people are in that decision-making stage where we can, and there's so many I want to name. I know there's questions about the venues in the chat. So if you're not really wanting to go full bore on this project and learn a new space, meet new people, like get all of these safeties in place, and you can do something in maybe just a less traditional space, something that's more movable. The venues might be your place to start. Maybe they have lobbies. Maybe they have parking lots. I know Thymele is a space that is not your traditional black box. So you can create living rooms. You can create, different environments within a still traditional venue that's going to have kind of the Fringe guidelines in place to help make that journey easier for you. And I'm sure, and I think it goes back to Monica's mention of like, go to Google Maps, start to look around and start to look at your venues, like look on their websites and see the weird spaces that they maybe aren't, pushing to fringe shows because most people aren't booking them. But hot damn, Hudson has a great coffee shop. Or shoot, I didn't even think about the giant closet at Thymele. That would be perfect for, whatever you're doing. So like you can think outside of the box, within the box, and start there as well. But so as people are making their decisions, could all of the panelists give me like a list of some pros of doing this BYOV, like larger scene thing, and some cons? That way, like, I think it helps people make an educated decision on whether this is going to be the right journey for them.
Well, my pro with running my own venue is just so liberating and cool to be running it, and I can just create performances whenever. And yeah, because like I wanted to be able to perform a bunch during Fringe, especially that is just one-on-one. Or I didn't mention earlier that just in terms of accessibility, my one-on-one experience could also be a two-on-one, because I knew that some people that either are familiar with like what it is to interact one-on-one with a character, just they're like, oh, that's like way too much pressure, that bringing a friend or a partner or like family along and a two-on-one, that then it could be more accessible for people. So yeah, I'd have one-on-one and two-on-ones. And so yeah, it was really cool to have like multiple of those in a day and have flexibility. And yeah, just like just a lot of artistic freedom with creating the experience around all that.
Were there no cons, just all positives? I love it. Like a hardship, right? Wouldn't do it again because of, but it's like, oh, this part kind of sucked. Like I didn't like getting insurance, or
I'll just say that I struck like the end of the rainbow, like gold, with the business that I was able to partner with, like a lot of other spaces that I was envisioning this like really small contained experience could happen in. That like I was actually shocked, like going to different businesses like in like central hot Fringe Zone, that so many people didn't know about the Fringe, or like maybe they do or whatever, but they're like, oh, sure, I'll charge this amount, or like, I don't know, or whatever. And I'm like, this is like grassroots, like nonprofit theater. So there were a lot of like creative spaces that I could have taken over and had freedom and stuff if I had a budget. But it was I'm just so grateful that like I did find a partnership with people that believed in the project and were excited to get behind it. So yeah, I'd say like, depending on your vision, if you don't have the budget to do like what you're envisioning, then it like might be a con of doing something that doesn't necessarily fit your mold. But that also is what's cool about art, of just, and especially this type of work, of pivoting and transforming as need be.
I love that. But flexibility is so key to make that work, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for me, I'm like, the pros are just like so fucking fun. And like I think it can be a pro or a con that you have with your own venue. You are in there's like a lot more setup. I think there's like more to think about. There's and again, another pro, but it could also be a con, is that you don't know what's going to happen, especially if you're doing outdoors. It's just like you don't. There simultaneously you have a lot of control, but you also have a lot less control. And I think for us, another pro was that, just getting to know a lot of people in Fringe, just realizing that how you're scheduling your show when you're able to do it is going to be impacted by all the other people who are doing shows in those spaces. So if you're using like a parking lot, or you're using a space that's not normally utilized, I think you have more flexibility with time. And yeah, I just think that there's just a lot more to think about. But yeah, like I said, so much fucking fun.
Yeah, this is all my experience too. The pros are artistic freedom, control. I'm such a control freak as a producer. I have very much enjoyed the times when I've brought my own venue and that I get to decide everything. And a big one actually is what time your shows are and when they are, just your schedule. Because of the nature of Fringe and the theaters, they're packing a lot of people. They're maximizing their schedule. And so they're probably going to offer you a package that is 1 or 2 primetime slots, 1 late night, 1 early afternoon, something like that, which is totally reasonable. If that's not what you want, maybe you look at a BYOV where depending, like Elliot was saying, depending on what type of location it is, you might have more control. And the cons are that, yeah, all the work's on you. But I don't know, if you're a control freak like me, that probably feels like a good thing most of the time.
You'll never learn anything faster, right? Like if you're
Yes.
diving into Fringe and choose to go, you know what, I'm going to do my first Fringe and I'm going to bring my own venue, you are going to get a crash course in so many producer trainings that it is going to be like, and it's so fun. But yeah, it's going to be like trial by fire. It's going to be learning as you go. And Fringe is always there. I want to name anyone who's like, okay, I really want to do this, but I don't really know where to start. Don't forget, like we can't run your Fringe or bring your own venue, but we can like point you in the right direction. We have been in the area for 15 years, even though some places still don't know Fringe exists. Xander is not wrong, but a lot of places do. And so if nothing else, we can help point you if we have some ideas on like, you know what, we do know we have a good relationship with, Jesse Boy's a hotspot. So I know that they are going to be receptive. Like we can help point you in some like general directions or let you know if things have not worked out in the past. I know Elliot did that. We had a couple emails when, you couldn't get a hold of certain venues that had like parking lots and wanted to like figure that route out. So get in touch with us, and we're not going to be able to solve all of your problems, but we can certainly help point you in the right direction or give you some advice along the way because it is challenging and we're here to help. I'm going to ask actually one more question because it came to my mind in the midst of that one. So like we talked pros and cons, what were some unforeseen budget lines that you didn't plan on? Because this is one that you can't, with a registered venue, everything up front outside of like your marketing and, little things that come up, you pretty much know what you're going to spend. This might be very different. So what were some costs that you didn't see coming? I see a lot of dramatic nods. I love it. Like they're there.
And we didn't, I said that we had an intuitive budget, which I don't recommend. I think you definitely want to plan as much as you can around that. But I think like we had a show where the van broke down 2 hours before the show, and it's just like we had to get it fixed. And obviously not before the show, we got another car to use, but so there was that. We didn't realize that we would need pop-up tents because it was so hot. So it was like, but we wanted to make sure that people had, that they were somewhat comfortable. And just yeah, I don't even remember all of the things that came up that was just like, well, okay, we're gonna figure this out now. And yeah, just plan for so many and people said this at multiple panels that I went to last year, just plan for everything to go wrong. And I was like, yeah, like Murphy's Law, that kind of thing, but like really like so much stuff will go wrong.
Oh, our van definitely also broke down at one point. And it had to be fixed. I don't remember now what happened, but something happened. We also ended up needing like both ice and hot water for different things. We were having to go to the mobile station, like buy tea to get cups of hot water for something. Like we made noodles in the show. So I was like, so that was a weird one. And yeah, like containers and storage and like that kind of stuff, like trucking things around ends up kind of becoming a line item. If you're not if you don't have a venue where things can be stored, that kind of becomes a thing. Like you want to invest in like a couple plastic bins to put everything in. So you're not like hauling stuff around and disintegrating Amazon boxes. So yeah, storage, transportable storage.
So my roaming venue technically broke down. I'm just gonna be funny because both of you said your vans broke down. That I had a certain quality wheels on the roaming desk, and Hollywood, all the sidewalks, all bumping everything. One of the wheels popped off, and what actually happened when it wasn't a performance. So that was great. That But even if it had, it's still like it was 3 wheels, could still go around. But so I had to go back to my fabricator, and then we put more heavy duty industrial wheels on it to have it healthily move around. rugged Hollywood. But that's so funny. All our venues broke down. My general advice when it comes to unexpected costs, I think that this is relevant for anybody producing theater. I mean, first of all, to have like a couple $100 at least set aside emergency budget for whatever. But people that are doing the traditional Fringe, actually, like when you have your set tech rehearsal and dress rehearsal times, or even you're just renting out the theater if you want additional rehearsal stuff, build in buffer times that like you may want to go further. And a lot of the venue packages, it'll be a set time of your tech and dress that's included with like the total amount that you're paying, but then check in with your venue of like, oh, is there buffer? If we need to go more, can we pay this extra amount? Because all the wildness that I was doing with the doing 2 different projects in the Hobgoblin Playhouse, it's like, oh yeah, we needed a ton of extra rehearsal time, and we had envisioned a certain amount and like had a set aside budget, but then there was a few more times that we wanted to get into the space, and so we had to allocate some more funds. But also, I wanted to talk about this at some point on here of like, if you're in a position to crowdfund, that is so incredible for doing this type of work, especially if you're doing immersive, like interactive type stuff. So yeah, if you're and if you've never crowdfunded in your community before, then and like you're ready to put your baby into the ether, like yeah.
I love that you mentioned if you've never done it before. It's like you only get so many times, like so often, right? There's like a rule of like you can only hit people so many times.
I think it's like every 4 or 5 years you get to do one. This has been my experience. It's about how often people want to hear from you.
Yeah, but at least I think you're right with like BYOV is a great one where you get to choose how many performances, like you have that control. So you can add like tickets as a part of your crowdfunding gift. You know, if you're donating X amount of dollars, you have more freedom to give away tickets and it not eat away at your budget by way of running out of seats, in the same way your 4 or 5 performances at a traditional venue would eventually eat up. So that's absolutely a good point with like perks of crowdfunding and things like that. And then, Monica, I'm going to read out what you popped into the chat here because I think it's really good information and I want to make sure it's on the live stream happening on YouTube. But industry best practice for contingency is 10% of your total budget. And yeah, Monica mentions it might be extreme for Fringe, but it's a good number to know and consider, because the last thing we want, like, it's expensive to Fringe. I said it at the town hall yesterday. I will continue to say it. Like, it is not cheap to Fringe. It is cheaper than it is to produce during the rest of the year, certainly, but it is in no world cheap. It is expensive as hell to produce in Los Angeles, and Fringe is no different than that. So I think never like try to overplan to make sure, because we don't want anyone to not be able to pay rent, to not be able to take care of themselves. Art is important, but you are more important, and the art can happen later.
Your rent in your home is more important.
Yes, until we live in a world where our rent is not so high. Like, please make sure you take care of yourselves. So it is smart to have more in the budget than you think is necessary for those worst case scenarios, for those extra rehearsals, because Xander's right. You want to make sure, or yeah, the tent that you had no choice, Elliot. You and your team had to provide shade if you were going to do a performance that day. So all of these contingencies are non-negotiable when it comes to providing a safe space and a quality show. So these are, yeah. Oh, y'all, thank you so much. Absolute brilliance. I absolutely love this panel because I think it's so interesting. It's the human experience meets art, meets like the producers. Like, this is a producer's training ground. It's trial by fire. It's literally figuring it out as you go, because every year there's going to be new things to talk about because new things happen. Like, there's always new lines added to the contracts, new items listed in these panels like this because, oh, that audience member did something I didn't expect. Now I am changing how I rehearse or how I plan. So these panels will always be a little different. But we're going to take some time to grab questions. So, we're going to keep it pretty casual. I mean, I know we have people on YouTube as well. So Roddy, let me know if there are any questions coming in on the YouTube chat. But if you are in the room here on Zoom with us and have a question, please feel free to raise your hand, either like digitally or just unmic and say, hey, I've got a question. And then please introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, and then tell us the name of your show. Start marketing now because, the more we hear that name of the show, the more audience is going to be ready to buy tickets. Any questions? Oh, Roddy, anything from the chat on YouTube?
Yeah, I've got one from the chat. This comes from Anthony. I'll just read out the what they wrote out, which is awesome talk, you guys. Anthony here. Thank you for this. It's my first Fringe. I was wondering if you guys know of a theater in the Fringe area that has an audience of spooky and horror shows. So yeah, I just pick your brains on that one.
To my knowledge, like the only premier venue that specializes in like the macabre and spooky and like immersive horror and stuff is in North Hollywood, which is out of the Fringe Zone, called Zombie Joe's Underground Theater Group. To my knowledge, like they're the only 365 degree in that vein, and then all other venues, it just depends on either like production companies and theater companies in residency taking over space, or just different shows coming in and out. But I'm gonna have a think right now of like different venues where there's been stuff. I know that just they Mealy, is that how you pronounce it?
Ideally, yeah.
They Mealy Arts. There's like a big town hall space and a dance studio and then two smaller rooms, and there's been shows that have rented out all venues and then made it like walk through experiences, and then they've had the freedom to decorate the spaces if you reserve enough time. And then the same thing with my Hobgoblin Playhouse, of how I sectioned off spaces to make more rooms and taking people through, depending on, well, like for instance, that my walkthrough show was around an hour, but I did a 90-minute show package, and we were able to create more time to set up and tear down. And I know like some other shows at Fringe that instead of the traditional 15-minute setup and 15-minute tear down, they did a 90-minute show rental, and they spent like 45 minutes setting something up and then did their like 45-minute show and then checking everything. So but yeah, to my knowledge, there's not like, oh yeah, this is the built-in audience, like, yeah, everybody go here besides Zombie Joe's.
Yeah, I'll throw in, I know it's not venue, but it's kind of relevant in that we have the Screamiest Award, and we have not like made our awards official this year, but the last few years, I wouldn't be surprised if they came back, but it's Midsummer Scream, usually presents an award for the Screamiest show at the Fringe. So there is like an awards audience for that genre for sure. And also noting, yeah, again, audience not so much, but if you're looking for a venue that you can really transform, I know like 905 Cole is one that it's only operational Friday through Sunday, but they don't normally stack shows like some of the venues. Like the 15-minute load in, load out is going to be tough to do much of anything with the space. Whereas a space like 905 Cole has been known to do more of the immersive. There's been a Gatsby immersive in that space, and like things that have really taken over a whole space.
This past December, I was in an immersive Christmas Carol show there, and we utilized every space, and it's known as sandbox immersive or open world, where the audience has free will to go wherever into all the different spaces, and there's actors and stuff happening everywhere. But yeah, 905 Cole, I don't know what they'd charge for Fringe to rent out everything, but they have a giant courtyard, they have a big lobby, they have a main theater, a studio theater, and then 2 levels of classrooms. And so we had access to everything. It was so cool.
Yeah, that kind of brings up an interesting point, which is that any theater space, you can talk to the venue about using it in a non-traditional way.
Mhm.
Like I'm thinking about the dressing room behind, what is it? The Broadwater, but actually both have interesting backstage spaces. The one on Santa Monica and the entrance on Lillian. There's some interesting backstage stuff going on there. And well, I mean, I love backstages of theaters, and like, depending on the space, you can talk to them. Like, would it be okay if I did, this is a 50-seat house, but I only want 20 audience members because I want to take people through the dressing rooms and, I don't know, the hallways and the bathrooms and whatever. Like, that's totally an option. I think you'll find that Anthony, you'll find that you'll probably want to decide on vibe and like what feels right. Because I think LA is, we're the horror capital of the country. You're going to find that audience who loves horror, no matter where you are within the Fringe Zone.
And I love and play with lights too, right? Like sensory can be a big part of it. And I specifically, I've definitely seen this in other fringes like Edinburgh and Adelaide, where they just play with light and then it's all sensory. Like you turn off the lights and we don't know what's what anymore. You don't have to worry about, the set dressing. There's none of that necessary. It's all about the sound and the touch and the things that are within. So, I mean, it actually brings up consent, which we lately talked about too. But knowing if you're touching people, think about ways to make sure you're doing so with consent and full understanding of what is going to take place in that space. So if you are in an all, dark setting and you plan on touching the audience, make sure that's a discussion ahead of time. Or you have ways to, mark safety, whether it's sometimes, here's a sticker for people that are willing to play, a little bit more. Or there's ways, I know Peter was a clown who did a show last year who had a great way of gauging his audience's comfortability by having a moment with them before the show started. It's coming up, and it was this, I remember he grabbed my hand and it took a minute. And at first I was like, what in the hell is happening? And I was like, oh my God, he's testing my comfortability. He could see that I was panicked, that I was sweating profusely just by like a quick handhold. And I was never bothered the entire show. So it's like thinking of this, especially in the horror genre. I'm glad that came up because it brought me to consent, but thinking of ways to make sure your audience is safe is especially important if you're going to scare them.
That's such a cool story, Lois. I love that.
Any other questions? Oh, I see a camera come on. Yeah, pop in. Yeah, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
It's not really a question. I just want to put it out there since we are on the topic of horror shows. First of all, my name's Lauren. Pronouns are they, them. The name of my show is called The Young Jane Show. It is a solo horror musical, queer themed. So I just want to say if anybody is doing a horror show with queer themes, please reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. But June is also Pride Month. Regardless of who is in office, it is still Pride Month. And part of me, how I celebrate Pride is just to highlight queer folks' contributions to the horror genre. Mary Shelley, she invented both horror and sci-fi. So I always like to bring that to the forefront. So if anyone is doing a horror show with queer themes, please reach out to me. Maybe we can cross promote or, interact with each other's shows, something like that. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that. And I think that is a big part of the Fringe community, right? I think all of the panelists can speak to that is you're doing exactly the right thing. Dive in and how can you help a fellow show and how can your fellow show help you? And that working together is going to create such a better experience for everyone involved. All right, last call for questions. And if not, I think 4 minutes early on time. Last call with questions from the chat. Roddy, anything on YouTube?
We are good. Anthony just said, you guys are the best. Thank you. Looking forward to meeting everyone.
Thank you, Anthony. Awesome. Y'all, you are the best. I so appreciate you sharing your expertise. And again, this is why Fringe is so impactful, is like this knowledge share and the experienced veterans being willing to share all that they know and because there's room at the table for everyone. And that really is how the Fringe operates. And so thank you for being shining examples of that. I can't wait to we're going to use these last 3 minutes. Do you have anything to promote? What are you working on right now? What should people keep an eye out for?
Well, I am doing complaint appointments with the Supervisor 2.0 in my venue that I'm running and have artistic freedom. And you will see it a lot on the daily schedule page because I'll be doing a lot of shows. So yeah, pretty easy to find the info on that. And you can keep up to date with me on my Instagram at Xander with a Z _ Raphael. And Complaints Department has an Instagram. It's at Complaint Services. And yeah, that's me and complaint.
Thank you, Xander. What about you, Elliot?
Nothing, nothing for the Fringe this year, but it's kind of a secret, sort of. But we are in the process of optioning van life as a feature, which is very, very crazy and exciting. And yeah, if and when hopefully that happens, we'll get it out there. And so just keep your eyes peeled.
Congratulations. That's so exciting.
So cool. Gosh, I just started my own business. It's called Aviary Creative Works, and I'm making public facing art with partners like museums and libraries. I'll drop it in the chat. And then my theater company, Capital W, has a new project that's going to be hopefully in public workshops in the spring. And one last really weird plug. If anyone's into mending, again, my husband is laughing at me. He just likes to listen, so he can do that. I'm teaching a workshop this Saturday about how to fix your clothes and make them more fun. So I'll drop my Instagram in the chat. And if you are interested in any of those things, you can find them all there.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, please, panelists, drop your Instagrams, your websites in the chat. We're so grateful for y'all. And so we're going to, Roddy, go ahead and take it off. Actually, scholarships, y'all apply tomorrow midnight. Make sure you apply by tomorrow at midnight. We would love to have your application in so we can give out so many scholarships